Welcome to the Alcohol-Free Revolution podcast. My name is James Lloyd.
And I'm Steve Smith. We are both former professional drinkers turned qualified alcohol-free coaches.
And we're here to inspire you to explore your best life alcohol-free. Whether you're sober curious, considering taking a break, or already loving life alcohol-free, this podcast is for you. Each week, we'll share ideas, tools, and conversations with the leading voices from within the alcohol-free space.
And our goal is simple: to give you the confidence to try it for yourself with stories and strategies that show just how powerful pressing pause on the booze can be.
I coach high achievers, leaders and entrepreneurs who want to reset and regain control of their relationship with alcohol. I focus on breaking down the neuroscience of drinking, because once you understand what's happening in your brain, everything changes. You can find out more about me at my website, alcoholfreecoach.com. Plus, we've recorded a special bonus episode where Steve interviews me about my journey and my work. Just search the Alcohol-Free Revolution, episode 9.
And I work with high-performing dads, helping them show up more consistently at home and at work, and also in their training, by building resilience and unlocking their true potential through an alcohol-free life. I'm also a qualified USGA ultramarathon coach. You can hear about my story in a bonus episode and connect with me on Instagram at sober.brilliant or at soberilliant.com.
Before we dive in, a quick favour. Please hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss another episode.
And if you enjoy it, give us a 5-star review. It really helps others who are sober curious find the show, and together we can grow the alcohol-free revolution.
Thanks for listening. On with today's show.
Welcome to this start again. Welcome to this very special edition of the Alcohol-Free Revolution, where I'm going to interview co-host James. And how are you doing today, James? Because this is a little bit different an episode.
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks. Well, we thought it would be a good idea to do a couple of bonus episodes where you interview me a little bit about me and my background and my coaching, and then we'll do a separate episode where we change chairs and I interview you. How do you feel about that?
It's a good idea. It saves us boring everyone on every other episode, just telling them all about us. So it gives us an opportunity if people are interested and want to jump on and learn a little bit more about our background, then great. But so amazing. Yeah, it's going to feel a bit different, of course, but yeah, let's give it a go. And so I think with any guest episode, really, I'd really kind of want to just dig back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background, James, and how did you become alcohol-free? Did you have what we might deem as a serious drinking problem? But what led you to make that choice?
Well, where did it start? So I've been alcohol-free since 2021, just gone past 4 years. But it all really kind of started in my late 30s. I had like this kind of growing sense, I guess, that I was losing control of my relationship with alcohol. I wasn't an alcoholic, I wasn't drinking vodka at 10 o'clock in the morning or anything like that, but my consumption was starting to creep up. I was probably drinking around about maybe 40 to 50 units of alcohol a week, which is, a few beers most evenings after work, and then, a bit of a binge at the weekend. But it definitely would be what I would consider sort of socially acceptable amounts. I was drinking pretty much similar amount as my friends, but as I was getting close to 40, I just had this feeling that something just wasn't right and things were changing, and I don't know, just this like an itch, I guess you kind of call it. And I was just starting to feel a lot of sort of downstream effects of drinking. I was finding that most days I was feeling quite physically and mentally pretty shit, and I just didn't have any energy. I kind of had that brain fog, and had kind of a lot of guilt and anxiety around alcohol as well, because I've been regularly attempting to kind of cut back and moderate, but it just wasn't really working. I'd take a break for maybe a few weeks, or I'd tell myself, okay, you're just going to drink at the weekends, and I'd do that for a few weeks, but then something would happen, like there'd be a work event on a Wednesday night, and obviously I was going to be drinking for that, and all these kind of boundaries and restrictions I'd set for myself would just collapse. And then you end up in this situation where you're just kind of beating yourself up because you've gone back on what you promised you said you would do, and I've got no willpower and I've got no discipline, and it just becomes kind of quite a negative cycle, and I kind of felt sort of quite trapped. And I didn't really ever envisage myself as someone in their 40s and 50s who was kind of drinking most days. It's not really what I pictured, my future to be. So I kind of knew something needed to change, but I didn't really know how to do it, and I just didn't really know how to go about it, and what to do next, really.
So was that, you'd had a couple of attempts. So what made it stick? What kind of really worked for you when you made that final decision and it began to stick?
Well, between the ages of 38 to 45, so around about 38 is when I first started to realize that something needs to change. Over those kind of 7 or so years, I was starting to take more regular breaks. So I take a month off here, maybe 2 months, even 3 months over the course of, this long period of time. But I always ended up going back to it. And it was this sort of sense that I had that I was always white knuckling it, that I was depriving myself of something that I wanted. And that was really quite miserable. Because nobody wants to have a life where they're depriving themselves of something that they want, something that they believe is giving them some kind of benefit. But then during my mid 40s, after having done this for 2 or 3 years of just this cycle of taking a break, but then always going back to it, I started to sort of listen to a lot more podcasts and audiobooks about alcohol, particularly around how it affects the brain and the sort of neuroscience behind it, really, sort of understanding how habits work and things like this, and what happens when alcohol is in our bodies, how that actually impacts our thinking. So I got really into this, and it also made me sort of question my fundamental beliefs about alcohol. So what was the benefit that I was deriving from drinking? Because I learned that our beliefs about alcohol are formed in our childhood. Usually this happens around sort of the ages of sort of 7 to 10. So and for me, when I kind of went back and I thought about how my beliefs about alcohol were established. I thought about my parents, and my parents growing up in the 80s were quite big drinkers. They weren't they weren't alcoholics, but they went to the pub every Friday night and every Sunday lunchtime. They went to a lot of parties. So what I was seeing as a kid was my parents always having fun around alcohol. So I kind of learned through the world around me that alcohol equals fun. So if you add alcohol to any situation, it's going to be more fun. And that was my learned belief. And I also, as I got a bit older and got into my mid-teens, I was quite an awkward teenager, like a lot of people are. And I found that drinking helped me fit in. But then fast forward 20 years, when I was getting towards 40, those two beliefs that I had about alcohol, that it was fun and that it helped me fit in, just weren't really relevant anymore when I was kind of in my mid 40s. So those beliefs weren't really true. And actually it was starting to hold me back. So understanding, how habit loops are formed, how we go through this cycle of, having a cue, a routine, and a reward around alcohol. That was a bit of a breakthrough for me. That really helped me understand what was going on, and so that was really a bit of a catalyst. If I could just give you a quick example of what I mean. So if you think of the brain as like an energy saving device, we're hardwired to take the path of least resistance. So our brain will always lead us down the path that's easiest, things that are familiar, things that are safe, things that the brain can predict. And if you've been drinking for 20 years, your brain is going to tell you to carry on drinking because that's what it knows and that's what it thinks is safe. And I've spoken about it on the pod before. It's a bit like walking through walking through a field, where you've got a very well-worn path that's easy to walk down, it's nice and smooth. And then you look to the other side of you and there's a field of grass, and walking through that grass is really difficult because it's really high and it's hard to push through and it feels difficult. And your brain will naturally tell you to walk through the path that that you're used to. But over time, if you kind of persevere walking through the overgrown path, it starts to become the established path, and the other one that you used to walk down starts to grow back. So that's was a real key for me, is that learning a different path, really.
I'm stealing that.
Do you like
I like
that?
that. That's a great
Good analogy,
analogy.
good
That's a
analogy.
brilliant analogy. Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, so as you started to learn a little bit more about the brain and how it works, what impact did that initially have on your drinking?
Well, I mean, first of all, I approached it, as I said before, I took a lot of breaks from alcohol, but I always went back to it. And people might be able to resonate with this a bit around dry January, around, well, you might be thinking, well, yeah, great, I've taken a break before and it was pretty miserable. I didn't like it. One of the things that I encourage my coaching clients to do is take a 60-day break from alcohol, but approach it with a growth mindset. And what that means is going into it with curiosity rather than restriction, because all of the times when I was taking breaks year after year, month after month, I was always approaching it with, okay, I'm just not going to go out. I'm going to find a period of time, maybe a month or 2 months, where I've got no big social events on, and I'm just going to hide myself away. And that is not sustainable. Going into a break from alcohol, like 60 days, I recommend, with a mindset of, okay, what could this be like? How could life be better? And look for all of the benefits that come with taking a break, rather than focusing on all of the restriction and the things you can't have. The reason I would suggest 60 days is because you can hide away for a month. You can do dry January and go, you know what, I'm just not going to go out. I'm just going to stay in at home and watch TV. You can't really do that for sort of 60 days or longer, because you've just got to clash with life. There's going to be weddings and funerals and christenings and whatever else comes along where there's going to be alcohol. So it pushes you into a situation where you've just got to deal with it and try it out. And the vast majority of the time, we tell ourselves that, well, I couldn't go out without alcohol. I couldn't go on holiday without alcohol. I couldn't have a Christmas without alcohol. All of these things. But have you tried it? All of these limiting beliefs go back to what I was saying earlier about the neuroscience, where your brain is telling you, oh, don't do that. Don't start drinking, because we that's not safe, because we don't know that path. That path's difficult. That's going to take more energy. So that's what you're being fed by your brain, is subliminal messages to carry on doing what you're doing, because that's what the brain knows. That's where it finds safety. That's where it saves energy. So going into these situations, like a social situation that you're not familiar with, your brain will push back, but you have to push through that. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes and the more natural it becomes. And that's like where I spoke about this idea of the field and the grass and ploughing a new path. That is what you're doing. You're rewiring your brain. But you have to, at the beginning, kind of push through that. And that's why I always recommend 60 days. And that's what worked for me. But going into it with a different mindset, one of, what are the benefits that I could get from this? How much better could life be if I did this? Rather than, I can't have a drink, this is going to be shit. It makes all of the difference.
Yeah, which is the opposite, obviously, being within a fixed mindset. So after you'd taken those 60 days off, what happened next?
Well, I never, at the time when I took off the 60 days, I never actually planned to say I'm never going to drink again. But what I started to notice by going into it with this growth mindset, this curiosity mindset, was that my beliefs about alcohol was starting to change, because my brain was rewiring itself. So I could have drunk again if I wanted to, but the more I started to focus on what the benefits were, and how great I was sleeping, how much more consistent my diet and exercise were, how my stress had declined, all of the how much weight I'd lost, all of these things were stacking up on the positive side. And on the other side, there was a couple of beers at the weekend or a glass of wine after dinner or whatever. And I'm looking at it thinking, I just don't really have the desire to drink anymore. And it was becoming less and less relevant to me. So it wasn't a case of, you can't have alcohol again, it's forbidden. It was about changing the desire. And that's really what happened with the 60-day break, is it just gave me that clarity to focus on, okay, these are all these great things that are happening to you. And my beliefs about it, my desire to drink just started to disappear and kind of ebb away. Although now I consider myself to be alcohol free, and I don't anticipate that I'll ever drink again, but I still don't ever say never, because there's no need. I just don't have the desire to drink anymore, and that's really what made all the difference, I think. One of the things that I also found as well is that I call alcohol the big domino, and obviously you're familiar with this term, in that it has such a knock-on effect on other things. So what I mean by that is, when you remove alcohol, it benefits. It's not just the alcohol that you're removing. You're improving, your diet starts to improve, your appearance starts to improve, your ability to exercise wants to improve, because your energy gets so much better. So it's not just about the alcohol itself. It just, once you push that domino over, it has this huge cascade of positive, life benefits. And, we talked about it a lot already on the pod, but things like sleeping and stress, it's just for one, that once you start sleeping really well every night, the downward positive effects of that are just absolutely transformational. It's just incredible.
It's interesting. Something popped into my head then when you were talking about the after that 60 days, and I was visualizing that there was actually the reason you didn't want to go down that was that there was 60 days worth of grass had grown on that old path you'd happened to be
Yeah,
walking, and some of it was getting hidden. So,
yeah.
so, so what did your wife and your friends make of all of that?
Well, my wife Kristen was a really big motivator for me because this was one of the things that was really starting to worry me as I got into my late 30s because my wife wasn't a big drinker, because her father had been quite a big drinker, and that was kind of quite jarring for her to sort of see me, getting pissed. I think it gave her a lot of bad memories of her growing up. But also, when I'd had a few drinks, I just acted like a dick all the time, and I'd had so many, Sunday mornings where I'd woken up in the spare room because I just acted like a dick the night before,
Mm,
after an argument, and I just, she's a very tolerant person, my wife. She's got to be married to me, but I kind of just kept thinking, you can't keep acting like this because one day you're going to wake up on your own, and that really started to worry me. She's also a very healthy person as well. She's inspired me to be a much healthier person, and I started to realize that you have a responsibility to your partner and also to your kids. I don't have kids, and obviously, you do, Steve, but I think you have a responsibility to the people who care about you to look after yourself, and particularly with your immediate family. Chris and I now talk about that. We've got a responsibility to each other to be around for the next 50 years to look after each other. If you're in a relationship where you're not looking after yourself and you're drinking and you're eating poorly and you're not exercising, but your wife is, what are you saying to them? Like when you get to 70, she's just going to give up her life to look after you because you're in such a poor state of health. And the
mm.
same for your kids. You're going to burden your kids with your health issues. And that's pretty shitty. So you're not however you feel in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s, you're going to feel worse in 20 years, so you need to start doing something about it, otherwise you're going to burden your family with you. Quite frankly, I hate to be sort of put it in those sort of terms, but it's not just about your health. Think about your parents. If you're in your 40s and your 50s, and maybe your parents are in your 70s and your 80s and they're in poor health, that's your responsibility to look after them. But it's a bit burdensome to an extent. So I guess my message is to certainly with your partner and your kids is it's your responsibility to look after yourself. In terms of my friends, well, they kind of really surprised me because my entire youth growing up, right up until I was in my 40s, was all about live sport, going out. I love going to football and rugby and F1. And I've got 30 years of getting pissed all day at football with, my two or three best friends. And that was a blocker for me. I was really worried about, well, I couldn't not drink because how's live sport going to work? It's not going to work without booze until I tried it. And I realized it doesn't make a fuck a difference.
Mm.
It's not about the alcohol. It's about the connection with your friends. And I said it. I've spoken about it on the pod before. When I first told my best friend that I wasn't going to drink anymore, I kind of positioned it as, you're not going to like this. This is going to be really tough. And he was just like, so what? Can care less if you drink or not. We've been mates for 30 years. What difference does that make? And he blew me away. I was almost in tears.
Mm.
And it's true. My relationships with my friends are way better because I'm fully present whenever we're together. I can remember all the experiences that we have now, and it improves friendships, so much. And I know a lot of people get concerned about, how it'll work with their friends, but it just makes relationships stronger and better and more present. And it's been brilliant on both counts, really.
Cool. So we first came across each other last year when you were training to become a coach. So how did that come about? What led you to decide to train to become a coach?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, that was brilliant. I'm so glad that we met. We were trained to be coaches last year, and I absolutely loved training to be a coach, meeting so many other people that are alcohol free. It was specifically alcohol free coaching that we did, well, alcohol free and positive psychology. And I just realized that my experiences with alcohol were so incredibly common. And the more people I've worked with over the last year, I hear the same, almost the same thing from everyone that I work with, the same story, and it's my story. And that's partly why I wanted to record this episode. It's because I want people to understand that, you know, it's the way alcohol affects people is there is some difference in it, obviously, but this story that I've just told about me is happening to so many people, and it's not just you that doesn't have an off switch. So many people don't have an off switch when it comes when it comes to alcohol. Alcohol is addictive to humans. It's not that you have an addictive personality, it's what's in your glass that's addictive. And you don't have to have a problem with alcohol to want something better. You don't have to be an alcoholic to want to change and improve so many areas of your life. And the reality is that even if you're drinking regularly, whether it's a glass of wine with your dinner or a couple of beers, it is holding you back. And taking a tactical break just to see what else there is can make all the difference. And that's why I wanted to get into coaching, because I wanted to connect with other people. Like I said, I've recently just turned 50. I want to do something a bit more meaningful that adds something to society that helps. Like I said, I don't have children, so I kind of feel in my life that I need to do something that's a bit more meaningful, that kind of helps society, I suppose. So that's partly why I've got into it, and I just love it. I absolutely love helping people with alcohol, because when you see people get to where we've got to, it's just life changing. You just want to, yeah, you want to come across as some kind of cultist or some sort of evangelist or anything, but it's just so good. When you take alcohol away, your life is just so good. And I just want to help other people have that experience and realize that it's not as hard as you think it is. Once you know the keys to the lock, it's just not as hard as you think it is.
Cool. So, to tell us a little bit more about your coaching, the people you work with, and what kind of results you're starting to see.
Well, the people I work with generally are basically me 10 years ago. So most commonly, I'm working with men that are sort of in the between sort of 35 to 55. I do work with a lot of women as well. But they're normally high achievers. So, they're people who've got a really good career. They're the leaders or the directors of businesses, entrepreneurs. Um, and but they just kind of want a bit more. And like I said, they're going through this situation in their sort of early 40s or so, and they're just sort of thinking that something's not quite right. And so what my coaching program focuses on is helping people go through this kind of 60-day break. It's a 10-week course that we run on Zoom. I also can do it in person as well if people are nearby. But it's 10 hours of coaching, one session a week. I also offer an additional 15-minute check-ins every other day. So if but those are entirely optional. Effectively, you get me for 10 weeks, pretty much whenever you need me. But it's structured around a 10-week course, and help people experience what it's like to go alcohol free for a couple of months. And like I say, after what you do after those couple of months is entirely up to you. But it's all about helping people change their mindsets and moving it away from this idea of depriving yourself of something you want, to curiosity about how good life can be, and really focusing on all those benefits. And I've got a whole vault of resources that are available to help people do that. So I create a lot of videos. You get a lot of deeper learning videos. I have a lot of how-to guides, PDFs, things like that. Lots of toolkits. Also write a lot of exclusive articles for my coachees, recommendations of alcohol-free alternatives, books and podcasts. There's just a ton of material that I can help people access. I also have a 90-minute keynote presentation that I gave on alcohol-free, and just a whole truckload of support, really. And one of the biggest things that people get, is that sense of accountability. For a lot of people, they just want to be able to make a commitment to somebody that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick to it. And it's not about me being a drill instructor and shouting at people if they have a drink. It's about having someone there in your corner, who's there to support you, provide motivation, strategy, tips, suggestions, and that, like I say, just that level of support, really. And it's been a brilliant year. Some of the people that I've helped this year have just gone from strength to strength, and it's just really wonderful to see.
Great. Cool. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I guess really just to sort of say that, if you are questioning your relationship with alcohol, you've got that itch that I've kind of spoken about. Let me tell you, it won't go away until you scratch it, until you do something about it. For me, I'd had that itch for a number of years, best part of sort of 7 years, until I actually made some sort of meaningful change with it. And the best thing you can do is just speak to somebody, whether that's me or Steve, somebody who understands, who's been there, who can empathize. And you're never going to get any judgment whatsoever from either one of us because we've been through it and we get it. Like I say, it's taking a break from alcohol with that mindset of curiosity rather than restriction is what makes all the difference. No one is saying you can never drink again, but unless you've taken a 60-day break from alcohol with the right mindset, you simply don't have the data to make an educated choice of how much better life can be.
Brilliant. Thank you. So where can people find more out about you?
Well, this podcast is a great place to start. Thank you if you're already listening. We're just so committed to doing this, and I love doing it. I'll be honest, absolutely love doing this podcast with you, Steve. But also, I'm on LinkedIn, so I post on LinkedIn every day about alcohol-related topics. Again, trying to provide some motivation and all of those great things about alcohol. You can book a call with me at any time through my website. It's absolutely no charge for that. Just just to chew the fat and just find out. Um, what it's like taking a break. My website's alcoholfreecoach.com. I also have a mailing list, my inner circle, which I speak to those people regularly via email. It can be completely anonymous. For a lot of people, speaking to a stranger about their relationship with alcohol is pretty difficult. So I'm not somebody who's going to be bombarding you with direct messages or emails you don't want. You can sit and watch from the background and I'll never interact with you. Alternatively, if you want to come and talk to me, my door is always open. But all of these things will be in the show notes. Like I said, I produce quite a lot of content via my website. I've currently got a video series called How to Alcohol in Your Brain, How to Master Your Mindset, and it's all about the neuroscience that I've talked about. So yeah, I'm a really super sociable, friendly guy. Come and speak to me. I'd love to talk to you. But that's about it, I think, Steve. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on for the last 20 minutes or whatever it is. I can't wait to do it with you next time.
I get to listen to you rambling on all the time. It's absolutely fine. Thanks so much for being open and honest, and thanks for sharing your story with us, Jade.
Thanks, mate. Speak to you
Cool.
soon.
Speak to you soon. Cheers.